Hello, my name is Richell Cruz, and this is a presentation on my research exploring the connection between plants and music. Now, here's just a table of contents, and this presentation will include my introduction, methodology, data analysis, and conclusion. So, firstly, I know we think we know what music is, playing sounds that just sound cool, but it's more than that. Music can be generalized as a combination of instruments and sound waves created to evoke emotion in its listener. Now, I want you to think, what is the one thing both you and plants have in common? I bet you didn't know that you might love music just as much as the plants in your backyard do. And although the exact origins of this research are relatively unknown, over time many studies have been conducted within the discipline of acoustic biology, an area of science that studies the relationship between sound and organisms. But they all had differing purposes, some focusing on comparing varying genres of music and their impacts, while others honed in on the impacts of one specific genre. Some of these genres include classical, rock, and traditional Indian music. So my study has two aims. One of them is to discover how lima bean plants are impacted by classical and rock music, and to also help provide more data into the field of acoustic biology. Now, according to these researchers here, Collins and Foreman, they specifically mentioned that very little research has been conducted on the specific effect of the growth of plants subjected to sounds of varying intensity and frequency, which is where my research comes in. My research question is, how do different ranges of BPM, corresponding to the average BPM of classical and rock music from Taylor Swift's discography, impact lima bean plant growth? Information regarding this correlation can benefit farmers, as music has been demonstrated to increase crop yield and has the potential to replace pesticides and fertilizers as a more productive and environmentally friendly alternative to conventional agriculture. Closing this knowledge gap will hopefully help fuel the switch from fertilizers and pesticides to music to help farmers create a more eco-friendly world. So my study aims to fit right into this discussion regarding the impact of classical and rock music to plant growth, as I test how plants react to classical and rock music. I hope to provide more relevant data to help try and move the field forward in its journey towards solidifying exactly what music does to plants, if anything. Now to my method section. So my research design was experimental research, and it was a mixed method, including both quantitative and qualitative aspects. So for my quantitative part of my research, I specifically measured the growth of the lima bean plants exposed to both classical and rock music over the span of 11 days. And for my qualitative side of my research, at the end of each phase of the experiment, I took photos of each plant just to measure the chlorophyll production in the plants to see if there was any difference there. My sample size included 4 lima bean plants, 2 of which were grown in the first phase of the experiment exposed to classical music, and 2 of which were grown in the second phase of the experiment exposed to rock. So firstly, I had to operationalize each genre of music in my experiment, in this case, rock and classical. So to do this, I found 2 massive playlists on Spotify, made by Spotify, with over 100 tracks of songs from each genre. Then I found the statistics for each song in that playlist, and then I calculated the average BPM of all the songs in each playlist. I found that the average BPM of rock, as shown here, was 123 beats per minute, and the average BPM of classical music was about 101 beats per minute. Now, once I would calculate that average BPM for both classical and rock, I went into Spotify and I downloaded the metadata for Taylor Swift's Folklore and Speak Now, Taylor's Version albums. And from there, I looked at the BPMs from each song and specifically picked out songs that were between plus or minus 10 beats per minute of the genre that I was coding the album to. So in this case, for Speak Now, Taylor's Version, since it's a country rock genre, I wanted to pick songs that would fit between plus or minus 10 beats per minute of the average BPM of rock music. So I did that here and I showed the songs that I chose. I repeated this process as well for folklore, and this is what the playlist ended up looking like. So this is just my data table of all the data that I've collected within both phases of the experiment. And now for my data analysis and discussion. So this first graph here just shows the effect of classical music from folklore on my 2 lima bean plants. And as shown, the data collected clearly illustrates that exposing lima bean plants to harmonious music classified as classical songs from folklore significantly stimulated plant height and growth. Throughout days 0 through 5, measurements were not taken as the plant had not sprouted upwards yet, but growth skyrocketed about halfway through. More specifically, plant 1 had an average growth speed of about 1.38 centimeters per day, and plant 2 had an average growth rate of about 0.85 centimeters per day. These images provide a better visual as to how the growth of the lima bean plants exposed to classical music from folklore look like. So this graph over here just shows the effect of rock music from Speak Now on my 2 lima bean plants, and as you can tell, there's nothing on this graph because the plants, they didn't grow. They haven't even sprouted yet. And as you can see, at the end of the experiment, the plants have not grown yet. That's why there was no data on the graph back there. As you can see, the plants exposed to classical music from folklore, very vibrant and green in their leaves. A plant exposed to rock music here, it hasn't even sprouted yet and it's yellow. Similarly to previous research, the plants grown with classical music have grown taller, faster, and have had more chlorophyll than the plants grown with rock music. So these findings help support the idea that music indeed poses a great impact on plant growth that can be used as a benefit. So again, these findings are useful for farmers globally as it provides more insight into exactly how music can aid plant growth and become a helpful alternative to crop production compared to pesticides and fertilizers. Now, I do have a few limitations that I would like to mention in my experiment. So firstly, in my first phase of the experiment, if you look closely at the image of the beans on day 3 here, despite both plants being exposed to exactly the same conditions, when planting them into their mason jars, the error was made of not exactly placing the beans the same way. You can see a little bit in the picture, giving plant 2, the plant on the right, a harder time sprouting upwards. This gives the idea that plant 2 was hindered by the music treatment. But when I compare these results to those generated by the beans exposed to rock music, one can see that it was not the case. So to accommodate for this error, the second set of beans grown in the experiment were placed in the exact same way just to minimize some variability within the data collected. Next limitation was simply just a lack of time. So as you noticed, the bean plants exposed to rock music, they haven't even sprouted yet. But I did notice that before the bean plants do sprout, they shed off that outer layer, which is something that you can see this bean plant here is doing. So I feel as though if I had more time, maybe like a month or so to actually grow the plants, I would have probably been able to see bean plants exposed to rock actually grow, and I could have actually collected some data there. My last few limitations include the weather, as the weather, which I cannot control, may have had an impact on the plant growth here, and also sound obstruction, as the walls of the mason jar may have obstructed the sound waves from my speaker into entering the plant, and it may have created some sort of impact there that I wasn't aware of or I can't really control. Now for my conclusion. Compared to rock music, classical music indeed is highly beneficial for plant growth and health. It provides taller, faster growing plants infused with higher levels of chlorophyll. Rock music is the complete opposite, proving to be detrimental to plant health and growth speed. So based on these findings, I do have some ideas for future iterations. Firstly, I believe that many more iterations of this experiment should be completed to help provide more data to support the idea that classical music is beneficial to plants. More specifically, I think that future iterations of this experiment should be longer and span a few months so that statistically significant amounts of data could be collected. In addition, I believe that more test bean plants and different types of bean plants in general need to be included in the experiment to help increase validity. Lastly, this study should include a set of control plants so that the direct impacts of the genres can be observed. So that is all for my experiment. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye.